You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey folks, welcome back. This is the Shoe In Show. It's the Footwear Industries podcast. We're diving into all sorts of topics and discussions around our industry right now, and basically because every aspect of our industry has been impacted by COVID. I'm joined with Matt Priest and Jasmine Pendergrass, of course. Hi guys. How are you guys doing?
Hey.
What's up, Andy?
We're all in different locations, recording from our basements or from a side room, and I think our producer Blake is even in his own bathroom doing the recording. So it's an interesting time for everyone. But as we look across our industry, you know, sourcing's being impacted, development design's being impacted, retail, of course, is being impacted, Matt. And, you know, what this podcast really is a kind of a foundation, or kind of like just a hub where people can share ideas and best practices and tips. So, you know, saying that, you know, who do we have on the show today that can really help us dive into what our industry is going to look like as we emerge out of this kind of pause that we've had the last several months?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. This week's guest is a shoe veteran for 25 years in the industry. Dave Grange has served in positions at Lacoste, at Wolverine Worldwide, at Pentland, Adidas or Adidas, depending on where you're from in this world. And he's a friend of ours. Dave, we are so excited that you are taking a moment out of your schedule to sit down with us, you know, air quotes, sit down with us, and to talk about the industry right now. Thanks for coming on Shoe In Show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Looking forward to having a chat. It's a pretty kind of dynamic and interesting time we're going through. So yeah, lots to talk about. But yeah, thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course, my friend, no problem. And I want to get a question off my chest out of the gate. Footwear Plus asked me this question recently in an interview, and we've talked a lot about we're in the middle of a retail apocalypse, and this is before COVID, because we were right sizing, you know, American brick and mortar retail as it relates to e-commerce and the ability to buy shoes from anywhere. And that's the retail apocalypse. It's upon us. And everyone was kind of sky is falling. And then COVID hits, and you have real scenes of empty streets and shuttered stores all over the country. Is this the real retail apocalypse we find ourselves in?
It's a great question, and I think everybody from wholesale to retail to manufacturer, everybody that's in this industry is trying to figure that out. I mean, for sure, retail is going through a massive change, and it seems that, you know, every year that we go through now feels like 5 years in the past. It's moving so quickly, and it's quite difficult to try and, you know, get your hands around and understand what's going on. I mean, there's definitely clearly a shift into digital, and, you know, the data and insight shows us that. And there's a move away from consumers that are wanting to venture into the mall. And this was pre the virus. You know, whether it's a convenience thing, you know, whether it's just that there's just every style, every color, every brand, every hard to get sneaker, everything you could ever want, you know, available on a tablet or on your phone from the comfort of your home, you know, and through great platforms like Amazon, you know, it's at your door the next day. I'm not sure. I mean, there's definitely going to be a reduction of brick and mortar stores, whether it's, you know, large retailers that are going to downsize their fleet, or whether it's independent stores that just don't have the foot traffic they need to justify the rent anymore. And then obviously the virus hit, which just completely hammered it. So it's going to be really interesting to see as we come out of this. And I know we're starting to see stores open and see communities somewhat get back to normal. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I mean, for me personally, I'm a believer in bricks and mortar are really important and will always be there.
Yeah.
I'm also a big believer in independent stores. You know, I think they're at the heart of the community. They definitely offer a service level and almost kind of like an intimacy
Mm-hmm.
that I think people want. I mean, I really appreciate walking into a local store, whether it's a hardware store, whether it's a shoe store, whatever it may be. I feel good about spending money in my local community, in my local town. I also like the sense of people sort of knowing me and me knowing them and feeling like you're part of something. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. It's just, what does it look like? How big is it? And and as we emerge from the retail meltdown, coupled with the virus, coupled with everything that's going on right now across the news and across towns, what does that look like? I think it's crystal ball stuff right now, but it's intriguing for sure.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree, Dave. And let me ask you this, and these are all kind of generalities, right? But which styles, which part segments of our industry, which companies, we don't have to get company specific, but who is best suited to navigate out of this and into industry 2.0 or 3.0 or 27.0, whatever iteration we're in at this point? Which side of the industry is better suited than maybe another side of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we talk about a lot and try and figure out. I think the brands that have a point of difference, a really clear point of difference, are going to survive this and thrive. So whether it's brands that are really iconic or have a deep heritage, or have just been part of people's lives for so long, I think those brands will always do well. One thing that we did see through retail going through such a tough time, and then over the past couple of months through the virus, is that really high energy, high trend, high heat product is absolutely evaporating like it did before. So whether, there's lots of brands I could mention. I'm just going to single one out because it's the easiest. Whether it was the Ben & Jerry Nike SB collaboration that dropped, or I think it was the Saturday just gone, the Nike 270 Travis Scott sneaker that launched. The uptake on that product is just so violent, and it's the same as it was prior. So I think if you've got the right brand collaborating in the right way, and it's a heritage brand or it's iconic, I think they weather the storm really, really well, even through recessions and everything that we see. Those brands can take that level of turbulence. And then with retail as well, I think it's kind of the same. For me, if there is a point of difference, if there's a great shopping experience, those places will weather this and survive. For me, it's the retailers that are a bit more kind of vanilla, don't really stand for anything too different. They're the ones that I think are going to struggle to one, maintain, and then two, attract consumers and shoppers going forward. So I know that's a bit of a broad answer to a big question, but I suppose it's points of difference, offering something that others can't offer, whether that's brand specific, product specific, or in terms of retail, having an experience that you genuinely enjoy, and you get something from it that you can't online or anywhere else.
Yeah, I want to jump in too real quick. I think what we're talking about here is the industry trying to respond or change to how consumers are changing, right? So if you're chasing the consumer to what you think they're wanting and what the way they want to consume it, then you'll always have success. The challenge is, I think a lot of businesses have had this whole model where they set up and they were like, this is what the product is, and if you like it, then you can buy it. If not, then somebody else will buy it. And I'm not sure that that's going to fly anymore. That we just set up these, to your point, these kind of vanilla stores or these vanilla channels or vanilla products that go out there and don't really connect with the consumer. And I fear, and maybe it's not a bad thing, but I fear, and maybe you can speak to this, Dave, but the whole model that we have of wholesale where some wholesaler will bring in a whole lot of shoes, millions of pairs, and then figure it out once it gets into the U.S. where they channel it to, right? Whether they go to, a Ross or TJ Maxx, or whether they go on Amazon, or whether, so what do we think about, like what kind of the channels look like going forward? You know, do you see, to your point about brands making dynamic product and finding new ways to communicate, are these the ones that will survive, and will the wholesale be there like it has been? Or are we going to see a real trim happen on how we make our shoes and bring them in?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I, that's kind of what I didn't want to mention any specific retailers, but
right.
That's what I was kind of alluding to with vanilla stores. I mean, you can walk into a mall anywhere in the States, in any city, and walk into particular stores that have been trading for a long time, and it's kind of heartbreaking how they just haven't changed. I mean, there's some department stores you walk into, and it could be 1985, literally.
Right.
Like, it doesn't feel like it's moved on. It doesn't feel like it's changed. And I think for a long time, some retailers and some brands as well, they got away with that. But with the explosion of digital, with the explosion of, maybe the consumer becoming a bit more fashion savvy, and conscious as well of the dollars that they spend, they're much more, I feel, much more aware of what they buy. And what does that link to in terms of quality or comfort or heritage or brand image? So where people should have probably started to work much harder a decade ago, didn't. I think this is when the real hard bite's going to come now. And then in terms of inventory as well, I mean, particularly what we're going to live through post-virus, the amount of footwear that's going to be in our marketplace, it's going to be absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of inventory that brands had, gearing up to go into this year that never sold. There's massive amounts that weren't delivered through February, March, April, and this month into June and maybe going forward. There's inventory that was piling up anyway, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this is washed out.
Right.
And obviously, there's the big closeout houses of TJ and Ross and Burlington, and Century, and the list goes on, Rack, etc. But yeah, there's going to be so much product to get through that it's going to be a balance of, well, how do we flush through the product we've got? How do we get retailers to take, from a brand's point of view, the product that we've still got high levels of inventory, and then trying to balance that with injecting what's going to be Q3, Q4, 2020 product into the marketplace.
Right.
And then more of the fundamental things as well about, taking the basics of business, payment, for example. If we do get all this product out there that should have gone earlier on in the year, what is the payment going to look like in terms of terms, and how can people get through that and then digest all this future product as well? My view is we're going to be definitely feeling the pain through this year, and my view is well into next year as well. I don't think the consumer can have the appetite, particularly in footwear, kind of selfishly talking about our industry, to be able to consume the amount of product that's going to be there.
Right. Yeah. And I have concerns as well, because I think there's a lot of folks out there who are happy to see stores reopen and the foot traffic, and we're all encouraged by that. The concern is when we start to get the late summer and into the fall, that's when the stimulus checks on top of unemployment start to go away. So disposable income starts to dry up. The reality sets in that this is a long-term economic hit. As businesses find ways to optimize, they may not need as many workers. And so that unemployment number that we have now will go down, but we're not sure that it's going to go down below 20 or 15%. So you've got a lot of people out there who are struggling, who had disposable income before, that were spending money on shoes that aren't now, and may only spend money on your shoes, to your point, to where they see huge discounts. And if you start to integrate in more product along the way, what's the propensity that they're going to pay $60 for a pair of shoes when they're demanding $40, or they're seeing shoes sell for $20? Why would they buy that new product unless it's interesting, different, unique, etc.? Dave, let me ask you about e-commerce channel. I think in the past, a lot of people have seen e-commerce as a way to grow their revenue, but it hasn't been really profitable because of either returns or I just don't feel like it's a hugely mature channel in terms of the supply chain, getting it efficiently to the consumer at a low cost. It's obviously a lot more profitable to send a bulk number of shoes to a store and sell them all like, piecemeal, doing it that way. What do you, and I also think, in terms of like what we see now in e-commerce is not what we're going to see in 6 months or a year. There's going to be a whole lot of new technologies, engagement tools that people will be adding. But going forward, what percent do you think will be online sales after this? Do you think it will, I think we've seen 15 to 20%, brands who are doing really well on the online channel have that. Do we see it edging upwards to 30%? Do we see 50% in 5 years? Like, what do you think will happen in terms of the channel?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to increase, for lots of reasons. One, as you go through this pandemic that we've lived through, there's a huge segment of the consumer base that maybe wasn't particularly tech savvy, that didn't particularly buy off Amazon or other sites or whatever it was, whereas, in some way they've been forced to. So I do think there's a much broader consumer base that's kind of blossomed through this. I mean, I'll give you a great example. It's a silly example, but it's a real life example. My mom has never used Amazon or bought anything from it, ever. Over the last 3 months, she's purchased pretty much everything through Amazon. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I know it's a tiny example, but I'm sure, that example is multiplied
right
across across our landscape of people that, would historically go to a bricks and mortar store that just don't anymore. So one, is there a new consumer base of maybe a slightly older demographic that is now become more tech savvy and more used to this? I think definitely. And then as well, even when we get the virus under control, which for me is going to mean, we have a vaccine and everybody is vaccinated, until that point when everybody is completely safe from this, from this pandemic that's kind of moved around the world, I think people are going to be scared and skittish to go into malls. There'll be some people that will be happy and open to do it and rush back in. But I think there's a big portion that will be very, very wary of that. Maybe on a Saturday, you took the kids to the mall, you bought them some new sneakers, whatever it may be. That will probably change to, we're taking the kids for an experience somewhere, and the sneakers are delivered through Zappos or whoever to my front door. So to answer your question, yes, I think online is going to continue to grow. I think it's going to give people confidence and safety. And I also think as well through brands, obviously everybody knows that digital is the future. And for brands that have their own websites, I think that the concentration level, upskilling, whether that's around people, up-tooling around the platform, I think that's going to be on everybody's kind of short, medium and long-term strategy. How can we improve our direct-to-consumer? How can we improve our web experience? How can we offer a broader selection online? So yeah, it's definitely not going to go away. And what we're living through at the moment is, in my opinion, is only going to exaggerate consumers wanting to use that. That facility to buy product more and more.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising the D2C prioritization, Dave, because Andy's right. The cost for fulfillment in e-commerce is, particularly if you're selling through someone else's site, is more expensive. But the quote unquote free shipping and free returns, that takes a toll on your margin. But if you can develop and push, and we even see a behemoth like Nike doing as much as they can to push traffic into their own ecosystem, that you hold on to so much margin in that way. And so I appreciate you calling that out. I want to pivot towards the question of trade shows, because you have a long experience with trade shows and dealing with footwear trade shows. And we've had WSA at the height of all of its glory, and we've had FM Platform, we have Atlanta, and we have even smaller regional shows. Now we have MECOM. They just announced their dates are in late September in Vegas, MECOM Americas, which used to be FM Platform. You need a flow chart to kind of keep track of it all, Dave. But and Fanny, I should, of course, mention Fanny. What is your view on the future of trade shows, the dates, kind of how are you thinking about the utility of these engagements in this environment? And then once, to your point, we get beyond the environment where people are nervous about getting together. What are the utility of trade shows beyond that?
Well, I mean, let's take away the issue of people being nervous to get together, because I do think that clouds the kind of broader conversation. Yeah. So if we kind of ignore that for now and just look at trade shows in its purest way, this is a conversation that is a really hot topic, within my team and within my co-workers in the broader industry. We all kind of look back on the glory days of WSA and GDS in Europe, and how that moved on to Project, which then moved on to Platform. So, I think we all look back at how great it used to be. But, to be honest, over the last few years, Vegas has become more and more strenuous, I guess, as a show. Big brands have dropped out and no longer show there. So as a consequence of that, there's less buyers that are showing up to it. And it's making it more and more difficult to spend the money, one, to have a custom booth there, which is, something that we've always done. And then to, just the T&E, to take all the team out, fly them all out, all in hotels, everything that goes with it in terms of, what's the return on investment. So trade shows are a real core part of the industry, and they're something that I deeply believe in. I think they're important to bring everybody together as a brand community. I think they're important to bring everybody together as a buying community. I would hate to see them go away, but over the past couple of years, they're definitely becoming less relevant. I know some brands deploy the money that they have spent on trade shows, and they now spend it on customer experiences. So they'll take their, 10 of their biggest accounts that used to come to trade shows that probably generated 80 or 90% of the forward orders, and they'll now fly them to their corporate head offices, wherever they may be, US, Europe, give them great experiences, spend some money on that way. And it also gives them the opportunity to work directly with their design team, future products, SMUs, start to build marketing campaigns and marketing plans. Whereas, at a trade show, it's a bit more difficult. You don't really have the time. Customers are flowing on and off the stands quickly. So it's a real tricky one. I mean, to be honest, the last show, let me get my dates right now. The last show of the week was February in Vegas. And August of the prior year, the show was pretty quiet for us. And we made a decision that February would be kind of our last attempt to see if we could, regain the future glories. But, the buying community just weren't there. And this was pre-virus, so there was nothing that was spooking anybody. There's just less people that want to see brands. So I'm not sure what it looks like. There's conversations of, do we change it from a 3-day show to a 1-day show and make it really explosive? Do we look at what ComplexCom have done? And do we invite, true customers in as well? There's lots of different ideas, but it kind of pains me to say it, but I do think the traditional trade show of brands rolling up, erecting elaborate stands, and then this huge buying community that arrive and are taken through the new collection and book their seasonal products. I do think it's unless someone can think of a really new, exciting, energetic platform and a way to reignite what's gone away. I think the old playbook is dying away, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let's face it, in this environment, a lot of old playbooks are probably dying away. So this isn't something where we're talking. I know the people who run the trade shows work really hard to think innovatively to bring people together. And I know they'll come up with solutions that are unique and innovative. And I'm actually looking forward to it. But at the same time, some things, some sacred cows are going to die during this process for sure. And speaking of which, the last thing I'll ask you before we bring in Jasmine is kind of, you mentioned bringing people into corporate space. What's your view on kind of corporate space, remote work, the need to have these big offices? How do you think the industry will look like in 18 months as it relates to its own corporate space and the need to come together? Will there be more of us continuing to work from home than would have been otherwise?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think most forward-thinking brands understood the benefits of people working from home anyway. So, it was definitely moving in that direction. Some brands have been doing it for a long time. Some, slightly more conservative maybe, or classic brands that still wanted, a corporate head office with everybody loaded up in it. I do think that's going to change dramatically. A great point around that, I think, has been the last 2 or 3 months between WebEx and Zoom and everything else that's gone on. It's really proved that a company can be much more connected than they were before. I mean, to be completely honest with my team, we're definitely more connected through WebEx and through the virus, which I know sounds crazy, but we absolutely were than we were prior. So every Monday and every Thursday, we'd have an hour-long WebEx to catch up what's going on. And we never used to do that. We used to have phone calls. So even just seeing people face-to-face and talking through it has definitely made everybody feel closer. So yeah, to answer your question, I think there'll be more people working remotely. I don't think brands are going to need a physical space that they've needed in the past, which, can be a big benefit on the CapEx as well of a business. So it's going to be interesting to see, who moves and at what pace. I think another great point as well, I was speaking to someone else who runs a brand, and we're talking about New York City particularly, and people not wanting to work in the city anymore after everything we've gone through. And we were kind of discussing this in more detail, that if you take the skills of people or the skill set that you can pull into a brand in and around New York City, and you look at that 5 years ago, and then you look at what that's going to look like next year. For one, there's this genuine kind of exodus of people that don't want to work in the city or live in the city anymore. How the kind of talent pool that brands can pull from. So, if you're a brand in Manhattan and you say, I absolutely have to have somebody work in this office. If you look at the talent pool that's out there and you take what was in a commutable 40-mile radius historically, and then reduce that even further to people that don't want to work in the city, you're really going to be capping the talent that you can bring into a business. Where, if you're open to say you can live anywhere at all, as long as we have a clear framework of what your job role is, we have, quantifiable objectives by quarter of what we need to achieve. We keep communication really high, so everybody's very comfortable and connected. It's going to become extremely hard to justify why you have to have someone sat at a desk in the office every day. And that's that narrative is going to get tougher and tougher for brands to justify, coupled with the huge expense of corporate head offices. What's needed and what isn't needed. I think that's going to be a debate that's going to roll on for the next couple of years. But I absolutely don't think that how footwear brands functioned a few years back is going to be how they're going to function in the future. I think there's a better way to do it. What's your view on that, guys? I'm curious to get your opinion on that.
I'll hop in on that. And Matt and I have been talking about this nonstop. And for us, it's been a benefit. And I think for a lot of people in our industry, especially executive levels, the benefit has been we travel all the time. So we're sort of used to working remotely. We're just not used to a lot of the teams working remotely. We always thought there needed to be synergies by being close to each other as you do designer development and marketing, et cetera. But to your point, the truth is Zoom can replace that pretty well. And can actually help facilitate better discussions. And you might actually see your workers, your coworkers more by doing Zoom than you would in the office, where you close the door and try to work on your project singularly. And I think, to your point about the talent it's not just that you're not going to have the talent pool, it's that the talent will dictate what they want to do. And if you want a really good, talented person to work for you, they're going to tell you whether they want to go in the office or whether they want to work from home and what their hours are going to be. And you're going to say, great. And you're going to have to figure that out. But the talent will dictate. We've already seen that with Twitter and Facebook announcing that, basically certain people are going to be able to work from home indefinitely, and there's going to be new tools. Dave, that's the key thing I think people need to think about is we're viewing what will look like a year or two from now in terms of workforce through the current lens by saying, okay, Zoom's working really well and these things are working really well. And I'm looking 2 years ahead technology wise and saying, no, there's going to be a company that comes along and finds a way to solve the challenge of productivity synchronization between workers. So maybe Bob works really well from 9 to 12 and Susie works really well from 3 to 5. There's going to be platforms that aren't like Slack or Monday or something like that. But it's going to be almost like a machine learning system where you plug something in and Bob puts his work in and the machine tells them, or the AI tells them, okay, this is the project we have to work on. Management's put this in here. Bob, you're going to do these things today. And here's your checklist because you're really efficient at doing this, and this. And Susie, you're going to do these things because they're really good at doing this, and this. And it'll be on the same platform and it will sync up those disjointed productivity hours, even globally. And so I can't even describe what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to do it the best I can, but there's something that's going to come along that's going to make it so much better than what we have right now. To the point where
you're taking my view and going one step further, which I think is absolutely right. I think you're spot on. My brain's going 10 foot forward. You're looking 20 foot forward. That probably is going to happen. And every brand, I mean, we've said this before, it's going to be the people that recover brands, not the brands recovering people.
Right.
So, every brand needs their A players. They need the best of the best in the industry, in whatever area that is. And to your point, if the best commercial salesperson that you can absolutely employ, within your financial constraints and within your brand, is based 100 miles away from the head office, but a lesser person is based 5 minutes from the head office, it's a bit of a no-brainer. You go for the best talent you can probably afford or probably get. And for me, regardless of location, and as I say, I do think that Zoom and BlueJean and WebEx and everything we've all been using, I think that's absolutely proved. Even to the point of we were doing happy hour Fridays at 5 o'clock, where all the team would get on. We wouldn't talk about work. Everyone have a drink, kick back, relax, chat. And we did that every Friday. We did it every Friday for 2 months. We never did that before, ever. So, even those crazy kind of more sociable sides where people have been forced in a friendly way, but forced to kind of, cross over with each other at the end of the working week, that's been a huge benefit. It's really brought people closer together, given everybody a sense of involvement. I think culturally, it's wired some people together. That maybe one person was on the East Coast and one was on the West, and they only saw each other at launches. So there's been a big positive. Obviously, it's a terrible situation we've come through, but there are a few things that I think when we come out the pipe at the other end, as an industry, and as people and as leaders, there's been some really big learnings too.
Yeah, that's for certain, Dave. I totally agree. Speaking of really big learnings, we want to learn what shoes you are wearing and what shoes you plan to get next. And so with that, I'm bringing in Jasmine Pendergrass, who's going to do our world famous What You Got, What You Getting segment. Jasmine, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I am here, and I'm here with no shoes on. So usually we have a pair of shoes on because we're, in studio and all together on the road taping these shows. So we usually have like a great pair of kicks to share with the audience. But today I am without shoes, but I do plan on getting some shoes for the summertime. So basically how this works, we just kind of go around and share what we have on now, what we got, and then what we're getting, which is like what shoes are next on your list. So for me, the shoe that is next on my list, I'm thinking maybe a pair of Crocs. Now, I know we've mentioned Crocs many of times during this time, but I also have had an opportunity to actually try on a pair because I never did, and they're super comfortable. My friend had a pair and we were the same size, and I just wanted to like see, you know, how they felt, and they were super comfortable. So I'm like, okay, I can imagine myself getting a pair of these in replacement of a new pair of slides that I might get. So I think that's next on my list. Dave, what about you?
So on my feet currently is a pair of Birkenstock Amazons, which I'm wearing. So I've been a Birkenstock consumer all my life. I think they're super comfy. I love everything about the brand, the heritage. And they're super versatile as well, you know, shorts or skinny jeans going out at night or whatever it may be. So yeah, I've got a pair of Birkenstocks on now. I'm a pretty lucky boy that I get access to some of the cooler collabs that are happening in the industry. Yep. So we mentioned earlier, I've got a pair of the Travis Scott Nike 270s that I actually got confirmation this morning are shipping and on their way.
Oh,
so
okay.
So I kind of bounce between Birkenstocks in the summer and the beach and warm weather, and then pretty much Nike. I also love Vans as well as a brand. But yeah, the kind of the rare Nikes and the collaborations that they drop and some of the hard to find sneakers is a big passion of mine. I've been a sneaker collector for all my life. So yeah, sneaker geek, unfortunately, I think is probably the right terminology.
They're welcome
Totally,
here.
you are safe here, my friend. I do want to point out, Jasmine, that Dave is wearing, ironically, the Birkenstock Amazons, and we all know the very public campaign Birkenstock has had against Amazon. So I find it quite interesting that they have a shoe line.
Maybe they need to change the names. I don't know.
For me, I live in these things. I really do. I mean, you wear the hell out of them as well, and they last for so long. But as I look down, I've got my trusted Birkenstock. It's all about the footbed, as David Kahn reminds us, as he's reminded us on this program a multitude of times. I don't have any shoes on like Jasmine, I have to be honest. I picked up a pair of the Allbirds Dashers, their new running shoe, and I've been running in them, and they get 2 big thumbs up for me. I was a little suspect, not because I didn't think they could create a great shoe. We've seen their ability to do that, but it's their real first performance shoe, and it really does perform really well, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Really? Yeah, Allbirds is a great brand. I saw the collaboration that they've got come in for like the ultimate sustainable shoe with Addy. And I've met Joey and Tim a couple of times, the founders of that brand. Yeah, huge fan. Massive respect for what they do. I'm looking forward to seeing the Addy shoe as well. I think the Addy times Allbirds or Allbirds times Addy, whichever way you look at it, will be a killer product.
Yeah, and I think collaboration is the way of the future, right? So when we're talking about unique product, as we spoke earlier, I think, you've got to find ways to collaborate in ways that people wouldn't expect. So obviously, Adidas is one of the world's largest shoe brands, collaborating with what in essence is still kind of a startup company. I know they're $1 billion valuation, but they're still very much in startup mode. And so having that collaboration will really fuel new innovative product and new innovative ways of making products. And I think we just have to lower our guards a little bit more and find ways to work together as an industry to capitalize, and we can have win-wins. We don't have to have zero-sum games like we used to in retail. So, and then that goes to backroom operations as well. Like, we all need to share materials, and we all need to work together on compliance issues. There's no one person, really does it better than someone else on some of these backroom non-business trade secret type stuff, that we're all making shoes the same way and many times in the same factory. So we just all need to start collaborating a bit more. And I think that kind of should open some eyes and open some minds a little bit. So Dave, thank you so much for coming on today.
I'm totally aligned with that as well. I think the the consumers kind of want to be surprised because there's been so much collaborating that's going on, and that's going to continue, and that's right and healthy. But I think trying to find ways to do something that really surprises everybody. I always thought that, maybe Adi should give Nike, one of their core shoes to see how Nike would do it, and Nike should give Adi one of their core shoes and see how they would do it. And to your point, just kind of think out the box, be really unique, be really different, surprise the customer.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? Like, just try it and see what's harming it. I mean, if Adidas and Nike combined on something, it would sell. It would sell like hotcakes. They would both make a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if Nike did their version of Stan Smith, I did their version of Air Force One? I mean, how crazy would that be?
Yeah, exactly. It's fun to think about. I would love to see it happen, but even the thought just kind of, I don't know. It's just a kind of optimistic, kind of fun thing to think about as we come out of this. So I think it's a good point.
I think I agree with you as well. I think brands should loosen up a bit, and look at what we can do and what should we do differently and who should we work with? Because this is a great industry that we work in. I absolutely love it. There's nothing else that I'd sooner do. And when you bring two great brands together, really creative minds, iconic products. And release something to the customer that's really different and unique and thoughtful. Everybody wins. The consumer gets something cool to wear, they're excited about. People that work in the brand have a high level of energy because they know there's this great new product that's going to be released. The retailers have something to shout about. So, yeah, it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, great point. Dave, thanks so much for being on with us today and for sharing your thoughts and insights. Is super valuable to us and super valuable to the industry. And thanks for always staying plugged in with FDRA and being a big supporter of ours. And folks, this is Shoe and Show. You can find us at shoeandshow.com. We're on every single audio platform out there. Please rate us. Please tell your friends about us. If you have ideas for shows or topics of discussions that you'd like us to focus on, drop us a line at shoeandshow.com. We actually have on the website now a voice note where you click a button and you can record your questions. And if it's really good, we'll actually air it and we'll discuss it on air. So take advantage of that. But again, Dave, thanks for joining us. And folks, thanks for listening. And until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.